All right, we're back. It's COMP213, and it's week 9, lesson 9, part 5. And last time we talked about publishing with Visual Studio directly on Centennial College, the website. And again, if you're, you can do it with any place. You don't have to just do it with Centennial. We're just giving Centennial as an example. And I've created my 5 company pages, right? This one I'm just looking at is my contact page, and I've got my main CSS. And if I look at my Solution Explorer here, for my student website, I've got all the different files here that you normally would see. About me, contact me, and so on. Right? So one thing we talked about last time, going back to the PowerPoint, is I got this fixed positioning stuff. So if I want to make that my sidebar or my top bar doesn't move around, I use fixed positioning. Right? What about relative positioning? Relative positioning changes the location of an element depending on where it would otherwise appear in the page. Right? So now the challenge is when you use relative positioning, it doesn't really. It's like making it responsive. It's almost like making it a responsive site because you're positioning it relative to other elements. Right? An example of this would be, my position here is relative, right? Okay, let's look at what W3C tells us about absolute positioning. So if I go W3C school, right? And it's W3C schools. And if I want to look at things like, relative, if I go relative positioning, right? So CSS layout, the position property, it gives us, like it showed before, these 4 different options: static, relative, fixed, and absolute. Right? We know what static does. It does kind of puts it back to normal in the regular way. Right? Position relative, though, it says an element with position relative is positioned relative to its normal position. Okay, this is going to tell you this. So saying the top, right, bottom, and left properties of a relatively positioned element will cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position. Other content will not be adjusted to fit into the gap left by the element. All right, so if I say position relative and I say left 30 pixels, right, wherever it is, it's going to move it to the left 30 pixels. Let's try this. So if I go to my products page, right, here's my products page, right, and my products, unfortunately what it says is main content. We're going to change my products page so it says products, right. I want to change my whole products div, right, so that the position is relative, right, and I want to move it to the left 30 pixels. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, I hit my main CSS, right? I want to target my products page, right? My products. Anything that has products ID on it, I want to say position relative. Then let's say left 30 pixels. Let's see what it does. So I'm going to go right, I'll kind of make this thing go. Let's take a look at my home page. Here's my products page. Take a look. All right. So here's our products. Look at my home page. My product page. Okay, let's make it more dramatic than 30 pixels. Because look, if you notice 30 pixels, look what it did. It kind of pushed it to the right, right? Let's make it so it's like 150 pixels. So kind of more dramatic change, right? Let's look at this. So refresh. Now it's 100. It's almost like a margin, right? But it's not. It's 150 pixels in relation to the page. Okay. What if I did this? Instead of left, I said right. Right. So it does this. Kind of pushes it off the page. Can't even see the top of it. It literally moves it around relative to the container, right? Why would I want that? Well, it's kind of like a padding in some ways, but it's always relative to the outside element. So again, relative positioning is good because if I want it to be 5 pixels from the left of my container, whatever that container is, it's like it'll push it to the right or push it to the left, whatever. It'll position up and down, right? That's what it does. And W3C schools, I'm not sure if you guys have Professor Filati made you look at this, but this is a pretty cool documentation. Like it has a pretty document website on every, basically it covers HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript and SQL, PHP and jQuery and all kinds of other stuff. Now it includes Bootstrap too. Just a little bit of a Bootstrap tutorial. But it covers a lot of different things if you want to learn how to code on your own. All right, let's go back to this one. So absolute positioning. It goes precisely specifies the location of an element outside of normal flow. All right, look at this. Left and top, right, and a width value. So this actually puts it somewhere. If you want to absolutely position something in exactly the right location that you want it, right, you can do so. Now, what's the bad thing about absolute positioning? Sheldon, what's the bad thing about absolute positioning? What's really bad about it? Remember, it's absolute. It'll always be exactly the number of pixels, right? Any idea? How about Kevin?
You vary on like different screen sizes.
Different screen sizes. It sucks for different screen sizes, doesn't it? Right? For different screen sizes, absolute positioning is like the worst, right? It's not really recommended, in other words. So let's say I want to make this thing. I want to use my products page again, right? And I want to use my products page so that instead of relative, it's absolute, right? And my top left, so my top, where I want to start, this is where it starts. My top is going to be, top is, if you notice, it's like vertical positioning. I'm going to start down by 40 pixels, right? And you know what? I want my my left, sorry, top and left to be 150 pixels, right? And I want my width to be 480 pixels. This is what absolute positioning does, right? It makes me control my view. Take a look, right? It actually puts it exactly where I told it to, and it's outside normal flow. So because my copyright statement is a footer, it doesn't know what to do with this thing because this is physically flowing on top of the footer. The footer needs to be absolutely positioned too. Once you do absolute positioning, you got to do absolute positioning all the time, right? Unless you want something to be positioned in the exact same location, right? Regardless of flow, right? Which is very rare. So, not really a fan of absolute positioning. I think it's not the way we do things these days. Definitely an old school way of doing stuff. And what I want to do is I want to cover CSS Sprites, but I want to cover it in a, and look, they actually they got W3C CSS validator. All right, this is kind of cool. I want to cover CSS Sprites next day because CSS Sprites require us to do a few more advanced things, and we can't use a sprite for graphics. I mean, it's almost a demo of its own how to use CSS Sprites, right? So in a nutshell, we've covered today, I'll end it here, we've covered everything. I just wanted to kind of finish off with the discussions between the positioning properties. So we covered static, which is just, it kind of returns everything to normal flow. Fixed, which actually fixed the element and doesn't make it move. Absolute, right, which makes it so that it's an absolute positioning of elements. You can put elements in exactly the right way. If you're a designer and you're doing a mock-up, that might be one reason why you want to use absolute positioning for the first page, just to show that this is what the page is going to look like. And then what you want to do is you want to convert it so it works on different pages, right? There are people who like to use absolute positioning in combination with media queries. Okay, follow me here. Why would I use, remember, now you guys haven't learned what media queries are, but imagine if you could say, if my viewport size is a large screen, anything greater than 720 pixels or whatever it is, then use this layout with absolute positioning, right? So it's for the desktop, right? And if my viewport size is the size of a tablet, right? So greater than 320 pixels and less than 720 pixels or whatever the hell it is, that breakpoint, then use absolute positioning for this layout. And then if it's the size of a cell phone, right, then use absolute positioning and do this layout. So absolute positioning is not bad necessarily for a specific layout, but it's really bad if you want to do responsive design. It doesn't work with responsive design so much. And not in the way we want to reflow our content. You would have to, it's almost as if you'd have to write different rules for absolute positioning over and over again. It's a lot of work. And you know what? Sometimes not worth it. It doesn't work. It's a lot of work, and it's better to make it so it's responsive, so it reflows and it's relative to everything else. All right, we'll see other examples of where absolute positioning is used and where it's used well. And we'll see other examples where it's used poorly. So this is the end of Chapter 7 for us. We're going to move on to, next week, we're going to do a little bit of Chapter 8 to finish up that mobile stuff, and then forms, so we can get our assignment 4 done. Right, because that would be good. And that's it for this week.